again, everybody, and welcome to this week's Furman Football Preview, presented by the Ingles Furman Radio Network. I am Dan Scott, voice of the Paladins. It is Week 3, the final non-conference game of this 2023 college football season for Clay Hendrix's club, and it is a road trip to just outside of Atlanta to take on Kennesaw State for just the second time in program history. This is a unique matchup for a myriad of reasons, chiefly because of the situation that Kennesaw State finds itself in. We're going to talk about that in depth here in just a moment, but it's good to have you with us, and looking forward to getting back out on the road and getting this game under our belts, and then, as I said, final non-conference game of the season starting next week back at Paladins Stadium. It is SoCon play the rest of the regular season, 8 Southern Conference games to close out the year, beginning with Mercer at Paladins Stadium. Don't want to get ahead of ourselves, though. Paladins are going to have a unique challenge on their hands when they take on Kennesaw State. Coming off of a South Carolina game, which saw Furman in many ways acquit itself well, and if you're just looking at the score 47-21 and you're saying to yourself, Dan Scott, you're looking at it through purple glasses, you got blasted. Well, the final score would say that they did. But looking at it from a physical standpoint, I thought going into that game that South Carolina would not be able to line up and physically manhandle Furman. They did not. They ran it 39 times and averaged less than 3 yards a carry. Where they hurt Furman was late in the second half and into the third quarter, kind of changing what they were doing offensively and started going over the top with the deep ball and having some success there. There were a few other things that Clay Hendrix kind of addressed going off the field at halftime that we won't belabor that played a role in how that game flipped right before the half. But for the most part, coming out of that game, got beat, but addressing some of the issues that going in, could they physically stand up to a Power 5 team? And the answer to that was a resounding yes. And talking to the coaches, talking to the players, they thought that was going to be the case. Now you flip the script to this incredibly unique Kennesaw State situation. They are transitioning up. They're going from FCS to FBS, and their ultimate landing spot is going to be in a rebuilding Conference USA. And in the process of doing so, they find themselves a team without a league because they have more scholarships than the 63 allowed by the FCS. They're not allowed to compete in their former conference, the Atlantic Sun. They don't have significantly more scholarship players right now than the 63, but they have more than 63, trending towards 70 and eventually getting towards 85. Whatever number they're at right now, it's more than 63. So they are a team without a conference. Because of that, they're only playing 9 games. They are playing 3 Division II opponents later in the season. And with only 9 games and with the 4-game redshirt rule, they are rolling the roster over from almost week to week and playing different players and different groups of players to make sure that they get accomplished what they want accomplished in certain games, get experience for young players, but still hold on to that red shirt year. Again, you can play, and this goes back about 3 years now, you can play 4 games, maybe even longer than that, but you can play 4 games at the college football level and still maintain your red shirt. So that's what Kennesaw State is doing. They're kind of picking and choosing who they're playing and when in their non-conference schedule. So when you look at the roster and the depth chart they ran out in their first game against Division II Tusculum and compare that to what they ran out against Chattanooga last week, it's almost an entirely different two-deep roster. what we saw against Chattanooga last week is what we expect to see against Furman this week. Games that they are loading up to try and win. And to that end, it's going to present a unique challenge. I don't think anybody forgets when Kennesaw State came in here in 2016 as, I believe, at the time, a second-year program and ran that triple option all over Furman. The final score was 52-42 here at Paladins Stadium, but it was not indicative of what that game was like. The Paladins were down something like 30 points in the first half. They just came in and ran that option all over the Paladins. They have built themselves, because of the number of wins that they generated inside the first 5 years as a startup program, 49, as the most successful startup program in college football history, and that exceeds the number of wins that the recently deceased Roy Kidd was able to put together when Eastern Kentucky University started its program. So this is a Kennesaw State program that expects to win. They've got big plans down there north of Atlanta, and that's why they're transitioning up, going to the FBS level, and eventually again landing in Conference USA. This season, a unique one, as I mentioned, because of only 9 games, multiple D2 games, just trying to fill the schedule any way they can, and rolling the roster over on a week-to-week basis, taking advantage of the 4-game rule and still redshirting as many players as possible. Taking a look at what some of the numbers look like when you just match up the coaches. Both teams come in, first of all, 1-1 on the season. The Owls beat Tusculum in Week 1, lost to Chattanooga last week. Brian Bohannon has been there since the rebuild started, 69-25, and now their 9th season of playing football again. And you see that's obviously his record at the program. Same thing with Clay Hendrix, 42-32 in 7 years at Furman. When you look at their statistical leaders, we mentioned that they were, and that's the operative word, an under-center triple option team. Now they are a pistol-oriented spread option team, but still run by the same guy, quarterback Jonathan Murphy, a transfer out of Long Beach Community College in Los Angeles. He leads them in passing, 400 yards. He leads them in rushing through their first 2 games, 122 yards. What you don't see on that graphic on your screen is their running back, Gabriel Benyard, who last week against Chattanooga had 3 catches for over 120 yards, and they lined him up in the backfield. They lined him up wide, and it's the typical option passing game where they're going to try to suck you in, get your eyes as a defensive back in the wrong place and get somebody running free behind you. They're just doing it out of the pistol look instead of under center with the B-back and the traditional double wings. So that's just a look at what they have done from a statistical leader standpoint through their first 2 games. DeAndre Morris, 11 tackles, and Javian Demetric with half a sack. Their 2-game statistical leaders. The defensive coordinator is new. The scheme, not much different than what Furman has seen in the past. And again, the good thing for the Paladins coaching staff is they've got the Chattanooga film from last week to go off of. They really believe that it's going to be the same personnel groups, the same basic 2 deep that Kennesaw State ran out against the Mocs that will come out on Saturday against the Paladins. And so that gives Furman a bit of an advantage that Chattanooga did not have. From a Furman standpoint, in talking to the coaches this week, and when we get to the Pepsi Countdown to Kickoff, which begins at 3:30 p.m. on Saturday, you'll hear Clay Hendrix, you'll hear Dwayne Vaughn, you'll hear Justin Roper all pretty much say the same thing. I asked them all the same question in varying forms. But after 2 games and heading into the final non-conference game, what do you hope to see? And in one way or another, they all came back to the same thing. want to see the team play a complete game. And Clay looking at all three phases of the game. He said through the first two games they've done some things well in each phase of the game. In the final non-conference game, he wants to see it all put together. Dwayne Vaughn wants to see his team do a better job of getting pressure on the quarterback, which has been a unique challenge in the first 2 weeks because most of the passing attack from both Tennessee Tech and South Carolina have been quick 1 or 2 step, take the snap, boom, get rid of the ball. There were some times when they did get a little pressure on Spencer Rattler last week in Columbia, and he was able to get outside, contain, extend plays with his feet, and make throws on the run. And, of course, then they were able to hit some deep balls down the field, and that's what kind of turned that game around. He wants to see better contain of the quarterback. He wants to see more pressure on the quarterback. Justin Roper, in talking to him, he wants to see the running game come together a little more consistently, and that is going to zero in on number 8, Dominic Roberto, with Grant Robinson, the primary backup, being out now for an extended period of time, it appears, with a high ankle sprain. Coming in behind him, Kendall Thomas, Jaquan Smith, Mayan Hicks, all play some roles. But Dominic Roberto is the guy, and of course Tyler Huff's ability to run at the quarterback position makes him dangerous there. But he wants to see the running game come together and make this team more balanced. He loves the fact that they've been able through the first 2 games to hit more deep balls down the field and showing ahead of the pace significantly in that area than they were a year ago. Something they worked on hard in the offseason. Would expect to see that continue. Looking at a defense from Kennesaw State that Justin compared quite a bit to what we saw from Elon in the playoffs here a year ago. A 4-2-5 set, and he said just 11 good defensive players, guys who do their jobs, who are going to go to the ball. So it'll be a unique and interesting challenge for this team, and I know that they're all looking forward to it. Just looking to put a complete game together and have all the cylinders hitting as best as they can heading into the conference opener next week against Mercer. The best news that we have on the injury front is that Big Fred Norman has practiced all week, and if he doesn't start, and that may be a game-time decision, he is available to play. And even better than that, Jacob Johanning has been cleared. He has been going through contact this week. He will not play on Saturday against Kennesaw State, but he will be officially ready to go on Sunday, gearing up towards being in the lineup against Mercer on Saturday next week, at least being available. How that works out, is he going to start? Don't know. But to get Jake back and have him in that lineup and have that group of 5 starting that they expected to have at week 1 is going to add a whole new dimension to everything they want to do, especially in the running game. So some good news on the injury front up front, but I think what we've seen, if you go back to last week against South Carolina, with Fred out, another new starter in his place on the offensive line at the right tackle in Blake Hunley, a redshirt junior, but not a guy who's played a lot of football here. That unit played pretty well against the Gamecocks. And a lot of it has to do with they had a good scouting report on South Carolina, knew more what the Gamecocks were going to do than they did the previous week as to what Tennessee Tech was going to do. But you're going to have, with Johanning back, with Big Fred back, so now you're going to have your front 5 guys, and you're going to have that depth that they thought that they were going to have. I think in the grand scheme of things, these first 2 or 3 games are going to end up being a blessing in disguise for this team moving forward once we get into conference play starting next week. Looking at the rest of the schedule in the Southern Conference for this week on your screen, VMI going to North Carolina State. That's a 2 o'clock kick on Saturday and is the CW Network game of the week. Western Carolina coming off of its huge win, long delayed win over Samford on the road at Eastern Kentucky. And as mentioned just a moment ago, the legendary Roy Kidd just passed away. And so EKU will definitely be honoring him. Wofford hosting Presbyterian College, Citadel on the road at Chattanooga, Samford going into Auburn, and ETSU will be at Austin Peay. From our standpoint, the Pepsi countdown to kickoff for the radio broadcast will begin at 3:30 p.m. on the Fan Upstate, 97.7 FM in Greenville, 97.1 FM in Spartanburg, and all over the world on the Odyssey app and Odyssey.com. And the kickoff is at 5 p.m. It will be available on ESPN Plus, as we always encourage you to do. You can watch it. Just turn the sound down. Sorry to my buddy Nolan Alexander, a fine young broadcaster who is going to be doing the ESPN Plus broadcast for the Owls. But turn the sound down and listen to our broadcast. David Cobb, Marcus McMorris, Tom Van Hoy, and I will be there, God willing, and looking forward to bringing you all the action of Furman and Kennesaw State from just outside of Atlanta on Saturday. Thank you, as always, for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you and talking to you from the booth on Saturday at Kennesaw State. This has been Week 3 of the Ingles Furman Radio Network preview. I'm Dan Scott, as always, saying God bless you, and so long, everybody.